I got down to like less than $1,000 on my bank account, and I was like, okay, well, cut this thing and get into sales.
Cole Gordon,
founder of Closers.io, master of high-ticket sales.
I was gonna go be a doctor because I thought that like that's what you do to be successful. Screw all this health stuff, I'm gonna do this. And so I was trying to be like, okay, what's like the top company in this space? And at the time, that company was called Traffic and Funnels, and I just saw what they were doing online, and I was like, man, if I sell for that company, I will just destroy it. And then eventually, you know, I kind of stopped growing there, and I left to start my own company, which is where I started Closers.io, and did 70K the first day.
What's the reason that you decided to scale Closers to the level that you did?
This thing in the industry isn't being done as well as it could be across the entire industry, and you want to raise the bar for the entire industry of what is like good.
What do you think is like one of the most common questions you get asked?
Where do I find good salespeople?
What do you tell them?
The number one thing you can do is, it's not how many products you could sell, it's how many different ways you can sell the same thing. When I started the business, we went from like 150 grand a month to 2.5 million a month. There has to be a gap between where they are now to where they want to be. That's like sales 101. So it starts with the pain or the problem. I just took a lot of, thousands and thousands of sales calls, and what really intrigued me was how can I remove all of the objections before the close?
What is Cole Gordon's best life advice?
Find an industry that you're really passionate about, create a specialized skill set in that industry, just solve a big problem.
Kickin' Ass, Taking Names podcast, and today we are here with a very special guest, Cole Gordon from Closers.io. Originally, you were a bartender, right?
But a long time ago.
Went from that to you started working in marketing agency, started working in sales, left sales, and then, guys, he built a company. And right now, you guys are like 30 to 50 a year million range.
Yeah,
right
I mean, you know, with this year, probably like 25 to 35.
So, I mean, essentially, you scaled right from 50K to 3 mil around a month, right? In like 14 months.
When I started the business, I got it to about 100,000 a month to 200,000 a month almost immediately. And then I kind of stayed there for about 9 months. And then once I really had the product figured out, we went from like 100 grand, 150 grand a month to 2.5 million a month no, that was about a year.
Yeah.
So from start to finish, it was probably like 18 months from 0 to 2.5 a month.
Yeah. So you've done some really interesting stuff, and I have a lot of questions about that. But for everybody watching, Cole is an expert in the closing space, sales recruiting, sales enablement, and a lot of other things. You guys also had RCA, Remote Closing Academy. I know that's not around anymore. And I've used a lot of your programs. I've seen, I mean, I hear about you everywhere. So anybody in like the closing space, it seems like you really found a market and you just said, I could do this better than everybody else. And you really have done and proven that since. So my question for you really to start off is, how did you really transition from working to saying like, okay, like, you know, what was the backstory into getting Closers.io started?
Well, how far do you want to go back? Do you want to go to my sales career or even before that?
Let's go from anything that's like, that's relevant to like you wanting to choose to do that.
Back in the day when I was in college, I started to get into different forms of personal development and realized I could change my situation. And what I did is, you know, at first it was like really getting my fitness down, then my social life down. Then it was, I started getting I went from like a crappy student to like only getting 4.0s. And I just knew how to apply a good work ethic and work the system. So I was wondering how I could apply personal development to, you know, business or making money. Because, you know, when you're buying these books and reading all of this stuff, you know, obviously that's a huge section of like personal development. I was like addicted to reading books back then. And so I read this book. And at the time, I was going to go be a doctor because I thought that like that's what you do to be successful is like you just go be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. When I read this book, I was like, oh, okay. It was called How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. It wasn't really necessarily a great book. It just, as reading it, I kind of came to this realization like, oh, like to make money, you go into business. You don't be like a doctor. You know, what am I doing? And so then I was like, okay, well, this was like my last semester at school. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to finish out school, but I'm going to somehow either start a health related business or some sort of business. And so I finished school and I was bartending. So I stayed bartending for a year. And during that time, my first thing was like trying to get like some sort of health blog traffic. And so it was like writing health blogs on research and all of this stuff. And I was very into that back then. Wrote a few blogs, was like, how do I get people to the site? How do you get traffic? So I kind of went down the traffic rabbit hole. And then through that, I got exposed to like the high ticket consulting world, right? And so I bought some courses and learned about that. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Screw all this health stuff. I love this stuff. I'm going to do this. And so then I started an ads agency, and I was primarily working with coaches in e-commerce, but a lot of e-commerce. But the problem was, and I got clients, I just had no idea how to like run a business. And so like I got clients, I was trying to like, I couldn't run my finances. The only thing I was like halfway good at was sales. So even though I was getting clients, I like was running on negative cash because I was outsourcing and doing all these dumb stuff. And so I got down to like less than $1,000 on my bank account. And I was like, okay, well, my deal with myself was if I get to that point, I'm just going to cut this thing and get into sales. And so I cut it, and I was going to get into sales temporarily to make some money and then kind of relaunch it. But I get into sales, and I thought I was really good at sales when I ran my agency. Once I got, and that's actually how I was able to really get a good sales job at least. Once I got in, I realized, I was like the worst guy in the team. And so from that stage, I really just got obsessive of it. And I just love the idea that, with business and my agency, there was like, I was so unequipped to succeed. I didn't know how to manage people, how to delegate. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to run my finances. I just was so green. And then when I got into sales, it was like, you only have to focus on one skill. That was just so refreshing. And I just lasered in on it. And, and then also being the worst guy on the team, I was like, well, I'm not going to be the worst guy on the team. That's not going to happen. I was very competitive. So like, I really worked at it, and I was not like natural. Like the first 6 months, I really, really sucked. And then, a few things clicked for me. And then by the time I left that team, I was one of the best people on the team. Then I was like, I kind of was a little bit more oriented with the space. So the same way there's like different opportunity vehicles in business, there's different opportunity vehicles in sales. So I realized that the vehicle that I was in, I thought I had nothing I didn't know what good leads and bad leads were. What happened was I just thought these leads were good. And in hindsight, they were horrible. But one of the reps had left, and he was like, yeah, dude, I'm selling this other offer. And like the leads are just ridiculous. It's so easy. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So then I went to that guy. He ran a sales agency, and I was like, hey, I want to work for you. So then he put me on this offer, and immediately I just started crushing it. And it was so much easier than what I was doing. Back what I was doing before, I was selling this lead generation LinkedIn product to realtors, and our market was people above 60. So it was so difficult. And there was a time where the leads were good, but it had really waned. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes with their lead generation, but it was so bad. Like people would just get on the call and have no idea why they were there, have no idea what this was. And I'm all for like, if somebody answers the phone, I'll get the job done. But these were truly like bad, horrible. Like it was truly bad, but I was still doing fine. I just didn't know any better. So it was nice because I kind of cut my teeth on those. And then when I got into this other thing, I was like, oh my gosh, like this was insane. Like this is way better. And really those leads were like average, but I was used to such terrible that I had a lot of success. And then I was like, wow, I'm making like double of what I was making before doing the same thing. So then I was like, okay, now I have like a good track record. And so I was trying to be like, okay, how do I get into what's like the top company in this space? And at the time that company was called Traffic and Funnels. And I just saw what they were doing online, and I was like, man, if I sell for that company, I am going to I was like, I felt like I was born to sell for that company. I was like, man, I will just destroy it for this company. So I went for them, and like, it kind of took me a month to kind of figure it out. But really after about 30 days, like I just was like dominating, and me and this other guy were pretty much the two top guys on the team, back and forth, month after month after month. He was really good too. And then eventually, I kind of stopped growing there, and I left to start my own company, which is where I started Closers.io. And that was kind of unintentional. It was like I sort of left that company. I didn't really know what I was going to do next. I was like, I don't really know where I could go to make more as a salesperson. Now at the time, like there just wasn't a lot of other sales gigs out there where you could make 30, 40, 50,000 a month that I was able to identify at least. Now in hindsight, there's ways I could have done that, but thankfully I didn't know, because that's why I was like, well, hell, I'll start my own company. And I went out to San Diego, and I just was at a mastermind, and we were kind of going around in a circle and helping people kind of bullet questions back and forth and what have you. And I was coaching people on like their offer and their sales and their marketing and this and that. And it was obvious I was like one of the most knowledgeable people in that room, even though my background was a sales guy. And so a couple of people at the mastermind were like, dude, you should start like an offer. You should do this. You should do that. Because they had known people who were also doing sales coaching, and they were like, dude, you're like way better than these people. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start this business. And then I launched it, and I just used my Facebook organic profile and did 70K the first day, then fulfilled on that. And then like 2 months later, I did it was like 274. I kind of like built a Facebook group.
How many
and launched.
clients would that split to be like because you say 70, but then it's
So that was like 10 to 12 was the 70. You know, what happened was I kind of launched off my personal profile and I booked like 15 calls and I closed like, honestly, I don't know what it was. I think I booked like 10 to 12 calls and closed almost every single one.
What was like the original offer? Like I'll go
It was just like sales coaching.
Coach
it was
your
like,
team and coach
No, it wasn't even teams. It was like, hey, if you just need sales training, you know, which is nowadays that would not sell very well to like the internet marketing space.
Yeah.
But back then, I don't know. I just you know, it was new, I guess. Like I was able to kind of pull it off and I had a feel for things and I knew people wanted to learn a little bit more about it. And, you know, I had a reputation built from another company, you know, that obviously
this
helped.
was only like what, 7, 8 years ago or?
No, so that would have been in 2019.
Okay. So that's not even that long ago.
Yeah. So that would have been 2019. Then what happened was I had that and I was just coaching sales reps and business owners on sales. And then kind of through that, I was like, man, the thing that I was like, the best clients and the ones that I really want more of are sales teams, you know, like they'll pay more and I can make more of an impact. And so then I started pivoted towards like sales team coaching or help you build your sales team. But then when I did that, the biggest problem was people were just like, I need salespeople. And that was something I would get hit up constantly. Like, do you know any good salespeople? Where can I find good salespeople? Then I was like, okay, I should do this sales recruiting thing. Like, so the third iteration was the sales recruiting. The downside of that is when I launched it, it was like the day everything shut down in the US with COVID. So like that message kind of fell flat, but I kind of just kept hitting it. And I could tell like, there was one post in particular I made where I made this post and I probably did 160 grand just from the post.
Was it like on Facebook or?
Yeah, it was just Facebook. You know, I don't even do it anymore, but it was a great way to get started. And it still is in a lot of ways if you have the right network. I mean, because what was nice for me is you take all these sales calls over the years as a salesperson and you just naturally sort of add those people as Facebook friends. So like I kind of had this like audience inadvertently built through my sales positions because every offer I sold more or less, they were good prospects for this offer later on, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I could tell as soon as I switched to recruiting, the response was like ridiculous, you know? So then I started, but the problem with that was the fulfillment. So I was like, okay, I got to build, I was kind of using my audience to connect some people, which was a great way to start. But then we started to build out like an actual recruiting function. It took us a long time to figure that out. But over the time we did, and once I really had some staff in place to where we could like recruit, you know, and I didn't have to do it myself from that moment and from a moment of bringing another guy in who ended up being kind of the CEO of the company, but he started as my first sales rep. We went from like 150K a month to 2.5 million a month pretty quickly. So it was like, and the way that happened was this would have been summer of 2020. I brought a few key people on that was really key. And we went from like 150 to like 600 and by January of 2021. And then in January of 2021, I brought on another guy and we did RCA. You know, doing two companies at once, I would not recommend to anybody. And now I'm only doing one company, which is definitely the right thing to do. But from when we brought on that second person and started RCA went from 0 to $1 million a month in 8 months. So like that was when we just had this insane growth velocity. And to be honest, like we handled it pretty as good as you could, to be quite frank. Like it's very hard to maintain the product and that level of growth. Like our product's much better now than it was, but we did a pretty good job. And then from there, you know, in 2022, we grew pretty steadily. 2023, we kind of stabilized. And then 2024, I did a lot of restructuring with just kind of paring a lot of stuff down and focusing on one company.
With that being said, like I've actually been through some of your programs and I noticed that there's a large amount of applicants and there's also like, it's kind of like you guys have some jobs that are cream of the crop. Like what are these companies looking for in terms of recruiting? Because obviously it's something that everybody wants. And how do you stand out as a recruit? Like, let's say, you know, someone's looking to get in started and they want to work with you. What do they do to stand out and really land like a top tier position with a company?
Well, I mean, so there's three main things, right? And the first thing is having the specialized knowledge, right? So specialized knowledge means like experience. Naval Ravikant says specialized knowledge is the knowledge and expertise you can only get through doing. Like you can't read a book, you can't go to college for it, you have to actually do it. And sales is one of those things for sure. Like I don't care how many sales books you read. They're great, but you have to have the experience, right? So have you actually done the thing that they're hiring for? Number two is industry acumen. So that's like, can I speak the language of sort of the market, and do I understand the market? Like if you're doing like a health offer of sorts, right? Like let's say it's like telemedicine hormone optimization. Well, like you need to be kind of like well-versed in that. And I mean, you're not a doctor, but you need to be well-versed enough to be able to like speak to those prospects' problems and also the solutions that you're presenting, right? You have to have that expertise. And then the third thing is buy-in, and buy into the mission and vision and values, right? And like really demonstrating that you're bought into the vision of what the company's doing. So, I mean, those are the three things you need to really present on that call. And also in terms of like an interview, the other things I would say as well is like, I mean, generally what I look for, obviously like basic stuff like professionalism, et cetera, that's a given. But just like good energy, good assertiveness, and just like this confidence, right? And I mean, that's something that I really find. I mean, you can learn it yourself. In terms of if I'm a business owner recruiting, I'm not going to bring somebody on and teach them how to be confident, right? Like that's for you to figure out in a different time and place. And, great, do that. But really what I'm looking for, like a guy I recently brought on, the main thing, the reason I brought him on is, he fit those other things that I'm talking about with industry acumen and the experience and buy-in and all those things. But like that he was just super assertive and super confident, and like just the way, and very articulate as well. So like those are the natural things I look for, competitiveness, stuff like that. Like if they do sports, or a lot of times like people with fitness backgrounds are very good because they have like the discipline, they're good with the routines. So I look for those things. So like if you can bring out those things and then combine it with those three things I mentioned, specialized knowledge, industry acumen, and buy-in, that's kind of the way to do it.
And have you taken the Myers-Briggs?
Yeah, I'm an ENTJ.
Okay, yeah, I got ENFP. Do you guys have a specific personality type that you look for?
No, like I think a lot of those things just people put too much weight into it. But yeah, like what's generally good is like if it's a DISC, like high DI. If it's a Myers-Briggs, like ENTJ is the classic one, right? But I don't put too much stock in it. And if you have experience hiring salespeople, you kind of can pick up the personality traits. Like it's the things I mentioned, like articulation, assertiveness, good, clear communication, confidence, stuff like that,
So as someone who's built like a multi-million-dollar company, would you say in general entrepreneurship, do you think it's more of something that people are born with, or do you think it's something that you learn over time?
Well, it's a little bit of both, right? So I think anybody can do it, right? Like fundamentally starting a business is not that hard, and getting a couple of clients and then therefore having a business is not that hard. Like anybody could do that. It's not like you're born an entrepreneur. I think there's truth to it in the sense of like to really have the level of freaking psychosis it takes to build something really big. Either you have some sort of predisposition, genetically or what have you, that kind of helps you do that. And then also, your personality and how that's developed as a child. Then also a lot of like your trauma, to be honest. There's very similar archetypes with people who, either like they never got approval from their dad, or like they never got seen by the opposite sex, or they always felt like they were small and then they got into lifting and that kind of. So like there's a lot of things that like, especially for men at least, I've seen that cause somebody to push this hard and kind of like push, really like blaze their own path, especially people who get really big. Because, to be honest, there's a certain level where why even add the stress? The income doesn't really change your life. Going from making $100,000 a month net income to $500,000 a month, you can do some cooler investments. I mean, but in terms of lifestyle and day to day, I don't really think it makes much of a difference. So there has to be something that kind of like some sort of, like a lot of times like emptiness that sort of drives you past that. And it can also be very vision oriented too. It doesn't have to be all dark, but I do think that's very common, with most people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So tying that in then with specifically the what's the reason that you decided to scale closers to the level that you did? Because like that also is kind of like why I asked the question, like, what was the mindset, and then why push it from like, hey, I'm doing good. I'm doing $100,000 a month. I'm bringing, 10 new clients, 5 new clients. Is it just like, I love serving clients, or was it an obsession with improving like everybody's systems, or was it just like everybody really like this whole thing is disorganized and I just think I could do it better, and there's like approving?
There's a combination of a lot of things, right? So don't get me wrong. You like serving clients, you like getting people results. And there is a feeling of like, okay, like, this thing in the industry isn't being done as well as it could be across the entire industry. And you want to raise the bar for the entire industry of what is like good, you know, and what should be really expected. Yeah. So there's like a part of it that's definitely that. But there's a part of it that is, I mean, man, for me, you know, part of like, you know, some black holes you're trying to fill from childhood for sure. Then on top of that, you know, there was like, when I sold for those previous companies, I saw a lot of people make money that I was like, man, I'm just like better than those people. And so there's a lot of like, you know, I saw people get to $1 million a month and I'm like, why I could easily, like, I'm easily as competent as this person. And so there's a lot of like competitiveness and comparison, just like, you know, when I did it, man, it was very, especially to that first 1 million a month. When I hit it, I really just, I mean, it sounds so narcissistic to say, and you know, a degree of narcissism is very common across a lot of entrepreneurs. Is like, I just really felt like I deserved, there was no celebration. It was like, I deserve that. You know, that's what I was supposed to do, you know? And so there's part of it that's that. And then part of it's, you know, you're kind of filling these black holes that you have emotionally. Part of it, you know, you also want to see how far you can push things and reach your potential. Part of it is like, it feels good to do new record amounts of, I mean, there's like a dopamine rush to that, right? So it feels good to do new amounts of revenue every single month and grow and expand and gain status within the industry. So it's kind of like this, you know, soup of a lot of those things.
So talk to me about a little bit about the 7 beliefs that you need every prospect to buy into before you close a deal.
Yeah. So this is the way I think about sales. No, I'm not saying it's the only way to think about it. It's like the truth. You know, I just took a lot of, you know, thousands and thousands of sales calls. And what really intrigued me was, okay, number one, how can I remove all of the objections before the close? Right? Because when I reviewed sales calls and I, you know, especially when I was starting off, I was terrible. And I'd review guys that were good. And, you know, what I was expecting to hear, and this is kind of like the traditional conditioning of what people think good sales is. Like you think like you're going to hear this like closing objections, jujitsu type of stuff, like, you know, really just well done. Like, you know, a good example is like Andy Elliott, he's local. Like he's a great guy. And, you know, we know some of their team. Like his Instagrams, like he's doing like the super cool closing and stuff. So I'm like, I thought that's like, and that's all that stuff's great. I just thought that was like what you needed to do to be able to close when I first got started. And then when I realized when I would review a lot of the guys that were better than me, it was like, they never even got objections at all, you know, or it's very rare, or like they'd have like one and they kind of like get through it and then they go to the close. And so what was evident is like, okay, they're doing something before the call to where by the time they get to the end of the call, it's like the prospect's almost closing themselves, right? And they're viewing you really as a leader and not a salesperson. So I kind of had that in my mind. And then I was also, you know, I would take all these courses and go through all this information. One guy I took a course from, he would talk about a chain of beliefs, right? Like there's a belief ladder. And if you can get people to, you know, if you can install certain beliefs into a prospect along this chain of beliefs, you can get them to the point to where they close. And then I also saw that reflected in some of the copywriting training I would do as well. And so I started to think like, this is more for like copy and webinars and stuff like that. Like if you're familiar with Russell Brunson's webinar script, you know, the way he structures those 3 secrets or what have you, the way it's supposed to be done is you're really supposed to work towards one single belief that if they believe that, they'll buy. Right. And so you just remove anything and everything, whether it's limiting beliefs or preconceived notions, et cetera, and install the empowering beliefs you need to have for somebody to basically just the only option for them to achieve whatever desire is to buy, and all the excuses are irrelevant, right? Or irrelevant. So I was like, man, how do I, so I would see this pop up in a lot of ways. And I'm like, man, I just love this, right? Because it kind of feels like a logical and like scientific way to do this. So I really tried to make a model of that applied to sales. And what I found through doing that is really like any really great sales script or any great salesperson, more or less, they do this even if they're not actively trying to do it. Like they might not think about, oh, there's 7 beliefs, you know, to get the prospect to buy, et cetera, but that they do this, right? So what are they? Number 1 is pain, right? So there has to be a gap between where they are now to where they want to be. That's like sales 101. Okay, that's what the entire call is about. So it starts with the pain or the problem. Like, why are they there? What is the gap between where they are now to where they want to be? Now, there's 2 types of gaps, right? There's an actual problem or a pain, which is like moving away from, like I might have back pain, or there's an unfulfilled desire, which is like I'm moving towards. So it's a little bit of a prospect perception. Do they think they're below the status quo, trying to get to the status quo, or do they feel like they're at the status quo, trying to get to the next level? You know, and a lot of this can be perception, because somebody who's really rich trying to get to the next level, you know, they could perceive themselves actually being below status quo. So anyways, that's how I think about it. So a good example is like if I'm getting stem cells, right? I could buy that, right? It could be, I could buy it because I literally have back pain and I can barely stand up, or I could just be doing it for like a longevity type of purpose. So at the end of the day, pain is the first one. And essentially that is like the foundation, because that's what the rest of this call is going to be about. It starts there and the entire call is about that. So like when closers just don't identify that in the very beginning, it's a huge miss. The second one is doubt, right? So you have to establish the gap. And then the question is like, well, why can't they do that on their own? You know? And so this is where a concept of the buying pocket comes in. I learned this from a mentor, but there needs to be a balance between they have to believe it can be done, but they can't think it's so likely that they can do it to where they could do it themselves. Now, sometimes like the doubt of why they can't do it themselves, it's just built right into the product, right? Like, you know, if I'm buying an ad attribution software, I guess my do it myself option would be build my own ad attribution software, right? Like sometimes it's just, you don't even need to elicit it on the call because it's built into the product and the offer or the pain. But like, you know, with coaching, for instance, which is a lot of what our clients sell, you know, that why can't I do this myself is a very, very common thing that you need to overcome. Okay. The next thing is cost. Cost of not taking action has to be higher to a substantial amount above a certain threshold of the cost in the form of time, energy, money, intention, et cetera, into purchasing your offer. Because obviously the offer costs money, but it also costs this person time, and it could also cost this person resources, or, you know, there's various other things. So the cost of them staying where they are right now or doing nothing, or what's going to happen if nothing changes, has to be not just higher, but substantially higher, right? Because typically, and Jordan Belfort talks about this, I don't remember what he says. It's like the cost, not the cost threshold or the risk threshold or something like action threshold, I think is what it is. But it has to be kind of above a certain threshold to really trigger. And that's where you get the urgency to where they're not going to want to put this off, right? So like all these tie back to objections, right? So if for pain, if you don't establish that, you can't even really position the solution as the bridge between their current desired situation. So they're just not going to want it, or they're going to feel like, okay, this sounds cool, I don't need this. Doubt is, okay, if you don't have that, either number one, they think they can do it themselves, or if there's too much doubt, they're like, I don't even think this is possible, right? And you build that up through telling stories and case studies, et cetera. Cost is really tied to like, I need to think about it, or you know, we'll do this next quarter or whatever, right? Because there's like there's no urgency. So that was three. The fourth one is desire. So there has to be a compelling payoff to fix the problem. Okay. The next one is support, which means the people around them, close to them, have to support them in fixing the problem, right? So this can go different ways. It can go up, down, or sideways. They could have a spouse or a business partner. They could have a board. They could have, you could be talking to a sales director. He's got to get approval from the CEO. Or it could be like you're talking to the CEO and they're like, this sounds great, I want to do it. I'm not going to be the one implementing it. So I got to check with my team to make sure they have the bandwidth. So it could be any, and usually we just think of spouse partner, but it could be any of those around there. So you need to make sure that there's no other stakeholders in one way, shape, or form of the decision that could influence or hold back, you know, that belief, right? The next thing is money, which means they have to have the resources and willingness to fix the problem. So the resources, like, do they physically have the resources? Like some people get to the end of the call and they have 500 credit and, you know, $1,000 in the bank account. If your product's 25K, like they physically can't do it, right? So there's that. There's also willingness, which really ties back to cost, but they might have the resources, but they might not be willing. Okay. But that really ties back to cost. Like for instance, I coached a dating coach a long, long time ago, but I always use this example. He was selling an attorney. The attorney had, you know, some sort of problem with his dating life or whatever. He got to the end of the call. He had the money, but he was like, it's just not worth it. Right. So he didn't build enough cost of what's going to happen and, you know, really anchoring that in. Right. So willingness really ties back to cost, but I'd like to address it also here. And then the last one is trust. Okay. So do they trust you? Do they trust your company? Do they trust your product? Is it going to be different, unique, superior than what they tried in the past? So the way I like to, the first six are built in discovery. The last one, and, you know, part of the trust is also built in the discovery, right? With rapport and energy and et cetera. And also, you know, part of what your marketing does and part of how you present on your sales call. But really the majority of it is really built in when you're more explaining who you are as the company and the salesperson and the product, right? And so the way I like to always say this is your pitch needs to be the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried has failed in the past and why this is going to be different. Okay, so a great way to explain this would be like, let's say I'm selling something that has to do with helping somebody lose weight, and the method, right? So like they have to trust your method of getting to the result, right? The method might be implementing like the carnivore diet or whatever, right? So through me explaining what we do with clients and why we use carnivore and why that's our unique method and what have you, I need to explain why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. So for instance, it's very easy with health because whether it's keto or carnivore or whatever, let's take keto, for example. With keto, the explanation of why everything didn't work in the past is, well, carbohydrates raise insulin, that keeps you from losing weight. So what we do instead is get you in a state of ketosis. It's a more fat burning state, la-da-da-da. Now, that's not necessarily evidence-based, to be honest, but that's what some people in that camp believe. And so do you see how, though, by the nature of me explaining the ketogenic diet and our method and how that works, I'm informing you of why what you tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. Let's say I was like selling a marketing agency service. Well, what I might do is, let's say they had tried something before in the past and they were doing to try to generate sales calls, a long form webinar. And instead, what we do is little short form application funnels. Well, that's my method, right? So when I'm explaining what we're going to implement with the client and kind of our methodology of doing things, by the nature of me explaining that, I'm also going to explain to you why the long form webinar thing you did might have worked in 2016, but the market shifted and doesn't work anymore. So the prospect has the aha of like, oh, that's why this didn't work in the past and why this is going to be different. So that really, not only does it really build the certainty that this is the right thing and now's the right time, but trust that belief in how I'm explaining it, it really what it's doing is preventing I tried something like this in the past and it hasn't worked, right? Because that's a common objection.
Very common, yeah.
Right? And so then the money is the money objections, the support is the spouse and partner objections, the desire is still, it doesn't really tie back to a certain objection, but generally what we see with people who are very they're in a ton of pain, but they have no vision, which is what you're trying to build with the desire part, is they just have analysis by paralysis. Like they don't take action. People who are excited about a vision, they have to be running away from something too and have that urgency, but they're excited about a vision, right? That usually compels people more toward action. There's studies behind this with Robert Cialdini and stuff, but we don't have to get into it. But those are the 7, right? Pain, doubt, cost, desire, money, support, trust. All those 6 after pain are predicated on the pain. That's why that's so important that you establish the gap in the problem in the very beginning of the call. Because the doubt, you have pain, which is what's the problem? Doubt is the inability to fix the problem. Cost is what's going to happen what's going to happen if this problem goes unchanged, right? What's going to happen if we don't fix the problem? Desire is the compelling payoff to fix the problem. Money is the resources and willingness to fix the problem. Support is, do people around you close to you support you in fixing the problem? Trust is, do I trust your unique method to fix the problem? So you see how everything is based on that first one. Mm-hmm. And man, people go through the entire call and not even know what the problem is.
That's interesting because one of the first times I've heard the sub level to the initial surface level objection, which is the inability or doubt is the inability to fix the problem. That's something that I never thought of before. But another thing I want to specifically ask you about is kind of lead systems. You said leads, you work with leads. One, how do you qualify a lead, right? Because there's a lot of people who get tons of leads online and it's how do we know, should we be taking 100 calls and say these 5 questions? Should we be hey, this is a much more in-depth, high qualification funnel? What's your favorite format in which you companies to qualify leads, or what do you suggest they should do?
So what are you talking about exactly? Are you talking about what's the best way to generate leads? Are you talking about if I'm a salesperson, what's the best way to qualify the people that I'm
on the company level, right? On the company level to generate leads.
Yeah, what I see works the best now, and we help our clients implement this, is something called the short form funnel. And that's just a term I made up, but basically what it is a short video where instead of doing a longer VSL, if you can, and some offers you can't, and you need to kind of do an ad to a slightly longer video, and it's still only the VSL will be 5 to 10 minutes, but especially with a service or something that's just easy to say in 3 minutes or less, you put everything, including the offer, in a CTA to book a call and an ad, then you still might have a VSL that goes a little bit more in depth and has information, or no VSL and you just do right to application. So it's either add to application or add to VSL to application. Sometimes we throw an opt-in page in there. B2C, I like opt-in pages. For B2B, I don't. That's kind of my stance on it right now. And so that would just basic meta ads for services like high ticket service. Even SaaS. Honestly, most industries, if you sell it with a remote sales team, that's what really works the best. And honestly, like there's so many different, even if you're doing in-person appointments, if you're doing, there's so many different sort of things you can sell just through that very short form way of doing it. And it's kind of weird how it happened because in 2000, like up to 2018, I'd say the standard was like add to like this 25, 30-minute VSL or like an
Webinar.
hour and a half long webinar. And really over time, what's happened is it's just kind of like shorten. And I've just found it's best to just like say what you need, say everything you need to say in the ad to get in the book. And then just like, that way somebody can watch the ad, they get it, they understand what you do, they can book, right? That's what I've seen work the best in terms of how the leads get qualified. You just have them fill out like an application and you just ask the questions you need to ask. That's different for every
You prefer
offer.
like a setter and then a closer, or just straight?
So generally what I do is we have them generate the leads, or like you're running that funnel, right? They fill out an application as part of running that funnel. Okay. Now, all of those applications get graded by an application grader. Okay. So we score those 1 through 4. Ones get canceled, like they might be spam or you can't help them or whatever. 3s and 4s go straight to the closer. 2s go straight to the setter. So the question is, okay, well, what designates somebody from going to a closer versus a setter? And really what it is like, I mean, it depends on the offer. Obviously, again, saying that for the fifth time, but generally for like our company, 2s are ones that like, it's like, we can't tell if they're 100% qualified, but we can't tell if they're disqualified either. So they might have really short responses. They might not be super like, we ask them what business they're in. They just say technology. Great. Right. Sometimes like certain revenue levels we'll send to the setters first. If it's too low of a revenue level, like sometimes we can help them people, sometimes we can't. So that's how we do it. And B2C, as long as the show rates are good, we'll just send everything to a closer. Cause usually most times if they just fill out the application and they're a real person, if you're B2C and it's like health coaching, for instance, you can kind of sell anybody, you just send them right to the closer. But there's different things you can do. Like, also, depending on application detail, you could also adjust the grade and then you can track show rates per the grade, and then certain low show rates you can send to the setters, or you can double book, and some you can single book. So there's all sorts of things you can do there that we help clients with. But I don't like ads to setter first to closer, right? The drop off in efficiency in each step, some people do better that way because it does make the sale easier a lot of times. It makes it easier for the closer. So but if you're good at training sales teams and you have a tight system, we've tested this both ways many times. There's too much drop off to where by the time you get somebody on a live call with a closer, it's like the cost per that appointment, it's like $1,500, right? Or it's way too high. And so that's kind of like the issue there. And plus, like, you're sending them to your setter first, which isn't as skilled as your closer. And if the setter's new, it's a first impression of your company. They might not know what they're doing. And so like, it really depends on how good the setter is a lot of times as well. But your sales team will love that system because the setters just get fed leads and the closers just get people who booked and spoke to a setter and showed up. And then they can yell at the setters if it's not good enough, right? And then their show rate's better. So, that gets pushed a lot from like the sales team, but from a company perspective, it's not as efficient. It's kind of what we like to do is that hybrid grading system and then slotting people where they need to get slotted.
Yeah, that's the first time I heard that. But quick mid question before I ask another main topic is how when you're working with setters, closers, etc. Just standard, let's say like, I know everybody's different. It depends on the offer. But what do you like as far as like, hey, this percentage commission for this setter for this rate?
Again, so percentages totally change because there's different offers and different price points. What doesn't change is like, if you want to be competitive with on-track earnings in the market, right? Like, so there's certain offers where, you could make 5% commission and make 40 grand a month. There's other offers you could make 15% commission and make 5K a month, right? So like the percentage doesn't really matter. It's a combination of what's the comm structure, what's the lead flow like and the lead quality like, and then what are the validated baseline numbers of whoever validated this acquisition and lead system. So what you have to start with and then reverse engineer what your comp structure is going to be from there is you start with, okay, what do I have to pay to attract the type of person that I want? And then you kind of reverse engineer the structure there. And then you can make sure that structure fits in with your P&L. So with a setter, it could be, they generally need to make 50 to 100K, 60 to 100K a year. Closer, if it's like lower tier, 70 to 150. If it's higher tier, 120 to 300-ish. I know that's a big range, but it's somewhere along those lines. Like and again, it depends on the specific offers and the specific people that you need. If you need people who are like experienced high ticket closers, you're gonna have to pay, find a comp structure to pay 15 to 30, right, a month. Because, if they've been in the game for a while, like, and they're really good, why would they go anywhere else? Like, that's what they want. That's what they know they can make. That's what they want to make. They just need to find the right company.
And they have already like referrals too, so I'm sure they've got options.
Yeah.
It's so one of the big topics I just want to make sure we cover before we go is AI, right? So like, how are you implementing it in your systems? What are you currently doing? What's exciting you about it? Just in general, what's your thoughts on it?
I get asked this a lot. I would say, in terms of what we're implementing, there's certain things, and they're not super exciting to talk about, but there's certain things that like the application grading system that I was talking about, like we have that fully automated with AI. There's other like recruiting processes that we have that we've been able to automate with AI that are like more like basic administrative, like really busy worky stuff to do. And I think also just the LLM, the language models, they can help like assist in, certain activities or research or what have you. And so they kind of accelerate things. So people can use them on their own to do certain things faster or research faster if they need it. But there's not a lot of like core business functions it's been huge for. What I would say is like the most popular thing in the space right now is the AI text setter. Like if you have leads come in and opt in, having an AI like message the leads and follow up the leads and set them on calls all through text, that can work. I think at the end of the day, the cost and if you're going to build it yourself and manage it and do it ongoing and all this stuff, it's like the cost of doing that, it's not that like text setting, for instance, it's so easy for a setter to do. It's very copy and paste. And then you also have somebody who's good enough to hop on the phone with people when they need to hop on the phone, and you're not trying to push everybody to a link. It's just more dynamic and easier for just a setter to just do it, in my opinion. Like we've kind of tested that a little bit. Like, okay, maybe we have our setters only do the calling and we can have everything, all the text automated. It didn't seem that productive for us. Now, by all means, if you have no setters, it's better than probably nothing. I've also seen it to where like, oh, no, okay, this text setter can like reactivate your old database. Again, like that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. I've seen some results with that, but also like in any basic, a lot of CRMs and also dialers, there's a function where you can just send out a text automation or a text automation logic through that to where like I could send a text blast to my list as if I'm a salesperson reaching out, asking a question. And then as soon as they respond, that gets flagged to the setter from that number. And then the setter just follows up from there. So I say all that to say, there's like some utility, but if you know what you're doing, it's just not a game changer. And it's nothing that you can't do already with the current tech stack and just using the setters. And I just think the setters, if you have a good setting team, are just going to be more dynamic and better and just more agile in terms of, and I'm sure that'll only get better. Like I do see some uses for it. So for instance, for like e-commerce companies, like a add to cart AI, like that reaches out to you, maybe asks some questions, whatever, answers questions and gets you to just go back to a basic like cart and buy. That seems like it has a lot of utility, right? So that could be good. In terms of like what everybody wants to know is like the robo dialer setters. Yeah. Or closers for it.
Like Air.ai and those.
Yeah. I've never seen anything that's been that impressive. A lot of the demos are like cut. So like you don't see the delays as much, or they're just like a really good demo that somebody just, it's like the one good demo that they had. I do think with that, what you're going to see is the most basic thing that'll get replaced first is like call centers. Like, if you call Amex and you have a terrible experience trying to approve something on your card, that type of stuff will get sorted out pretty quickly. And the way that's going to work is like with call centers, there's different layers. Like, have you ever gotten to a call center and then like you're, getting transferred all around and they finally move you up to a manager. And then, there's like different levels of kind of management. Yeah. So like the base layers, which is a lot of employees, right? It's going to cause like somewhat of an economic issue in terms of employment. Those are going to go first. And then, from there, then on,
hopefully they can do that with government too.
They probably could, but who knows if they'll actually implement that. With AI, that stuff will go first. And then, call centers is going to be number one. I think the next thing is like, local business appointment setting, right? Through both text AI and robodialing AI, all I'm doing is calling you and finding a meeting time to set up, right? So I think that'll have a lot of functionality. After that, it's going to be like very basic transactional type of sales. So like, I can't think of an example off my head, but anything that's just very basic, cut and dry, easy. you know? And then after that, maybe you're going to have like SaaS, where it's like, okay, you know, an AI, interactive AI can do a product demo for you. You know, there's a lot of SaaS companies, like CRM companies, for instance, that their sales teams are really bad, or they just don't have, you know, they barely have one. You know, and I think AI could do a decent job, and then you kind of have an overarching sales team to do the follow-ups and maybe the next call from that. I think the last thing that will, like, complex sales and stuff that's like, of course, like enterprise and long sales cycles and enterprise SaaS, for God's sakes. But even like what I do, which, you know, the companies we work with, it's a very specialized sales. So, you know, we'll have like IT companies selling their services, or agencies selling their services, or coaches selling their services, or even like certain other SaaS companies that have a little bit more of like a intricate service where it's just not this easy demo that they have, like a HubSpot or something. Those I think will be like the last to go. And we'll see that coming because we're not even at the point where call centers have been replaced. Yeah. So like, we're going to kind of, what I laid out is sort of how I see it progressing and kind of optimizing. So I'm not saying it could never happen, but it's not close right now. It could happen, you know, who knows how fast it will happen, but you'll see it in that trend.
Yeah.
And so the next wave is going to be co-pilots and agents. So for instance, co-pilots are like, you know, salespeople suck at doing their admin. They hate doing their admin. You could have like a one admin co-pilot AI for every single salesperson that makes sure, takes meetings on their notes, you know, customizes.
Personal assistant for you, right?
Exactly. So like that will that's going to be like the next wave after the language models, as well as agents. Like a good example of an agent is like an AI that can, you know, you want to do
copywriting too.
Well, you want to do a trip and book your flights and book your hotels and blah, 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 right? You could be like, hey, you know, plan me a trip to South Africa and I want to do this, that, and this, and that. Approve the itinerary for me, and then
logistical stuff. Of course,
so like that's coming pretty soon, right? So you'll have the agents and you'll have co-pilots. That's kind of like the next wave. But you know, any sort of crazy stuff that's gonna like replace specialized, skilled salespeople. You know, I'm not saying it's never going to happen. It's just not going to happen like next 2 years.
What about
with copy? I mean, look, what I've seen with that is it is phenomenal for doing research. Phenomenal. It's phenomenal for brainstorming. You can prompt it. I've seen people prompt it to write pretty dang good copy. To really write like world beating copy, it's not going to do that, right? Like that still creates a little bit of or requires a little bit of human creativity. But even if like, so for me, I kind of use it for the ends. So like I'll use it for a lot of the research and maybe some brainstorming and some hook brainstorming. And then I'll kind of write most of it myself and really kind of put my own originality in, let's say, the angle or the idea or the big idea or what have you. And then I might use it for a little bit of editing or a little bit of a post ideas as well. So it's really good, again, kind of co-pilot for that. And if you're absolutely terrible at copy, sure, it could probably write better copy than you can. It probably can really write better copy than 99.9% of people because most people aren't very good. But like if you're truly good at that skill, like it's, you know, it's not replacing really, really good people. But there is some utility there. And, you know, I've seen it write decent stuff. And depending on what, you know, it depends on what you do. In my industry, selling my services, for instance, you have to write really good copy and it has to be very dialed, right? There's certain other industries where you can write pretty crappy copy, but the offer is really good. It'll sell itself. I'm sure AI could sell that, right? So I think it all kind of just depends.
So with that being said, let's go into one of the final things I want to ask you is what, just in general, what do you think is like one of the most common questions you get asked? Like just biggest issues that they would say like, oh, that's a question for Cole Gordon.
Where do I find good salespeople?
What do you tell them?
Well, good salespeople. Well, the number one thing is good salespeople know other good salespeople. So that's kind of how I started my own business. Is I was a great salesperson. I knew a lot of good salespeople, and I kind of started with my audience and built it from there. So, you know, the number one thing you can do is if you have, it's kind of a little bit of a flywheel effect. Like if you have great salespeople, oftentimes they came from a different sales job or what have you, and they can bring over people from that, right? So working referrals from your own team. Another good area to find it, just for the average person, is your clients. So, because remember I mentioned those three things: specialized knowledge, industry acumen, and buy-in, right? Well, your clients, this is like a client-based business, right? I mean, some client-based businesses, this isn't going to apply. But if you're like a coach, this is a great idea. If you do, let's say, female hormonal health coaching, right? Most of your clients are probably not going to be qualified to be salespeople. But if you have hundreds of clients, there could be a handful that do have some good sales or business experience. They did your program. They loved it. They got amazing results. So they have that industry acumen. They have that buy-in, and you really only just got to polish them up on sales. That's a really great method. Even with like B2C biz op type offers, like create an e-commerce store or whatever. There's people in that who they're creating their store or whatever, but they love what you're doing. They're really bought in. They're really well versed in it. They want to do sales part-time, or not part-time, but like full-time, and then kind of do their business on. So like those are good options. For the industries I mentioned, our recruiting is really good. We just have, the nice thing about what we do is the longer you do it, the better it becomes, because our distribution kind of just compounds on itself. Certain people, they stay with somebody for a couple of years, they come back. And so we have a distribution of like over 200,000 plus salespeople. We have 16 full-time recruiters. So obviously we can help with that.
I think I saw like your ads were like the most prevalent for recruiting salespeople like I've ever seen. It just is what were you guys spending a month on ads, if you don't mind?
Well, we don't spend a lot on ads to recruit salespeople.
Right.
We spend money on ads to get business, right? And get business owners who need salespeople.
But inadvertently, you're like, people know that you guys are the ones.
Well, I guess that does have that effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
300 to 400 grand a month right now. I've spent as much as 800,000 in a single month. When I had multiple, if you go
is there a level at which it's not making as big of a difference? Like if you 300 versus 800?
Okay. So like a couple things. Yeah, with any sort of funnel or offer that you run, there's going to be some diminishing returns in spend. It's kind of creative dependent, funnel dependent, and offer dependent. So like the more you spend, the more you have to put out more creatives. And even the more you have to put out more creatives that aren't just variations, but they're an entirely new like concepts. Like a variation is like, I shot this ad in this room and now I'm going to shoot the same ad with the same script outside, right? That could be a variation. Entirely different concept is like, I'm going to hit a totally different pain point and angle on this ad. In this ad, I told a story. In this one, I'm going to do an offer promise driven type of thing, right? So the more types of variations you can have in creatives and then angles, the more spend you can do. And then at a certain point, you can take that pretty far. Most people don't even really take creatives to the extreme. We're not even doing it. But at a certain point, you can take even the funnels and have variations there. So for instance, it's not how many products you could sell, it's how many different ways you can sell the same thing. I'll give you a great example is like we have a funnel for like coaches, consultants, agencies, high ticket services that's for sales recruiting. We have another one that's very similar, but for private pay and cash pay medical services, right? That's like a totally different industry. It's the same thing, but it's kind of niching into a different industry. You could do it like that. I have a different funnel that it's really still selling our sales recruiting services, but I kind of bundled it all together with some marketing support that we do as well. And so it's a totally different big idea and totally different angle. It's actually the same product. And so see how there's variations within the funnels. So that allows you to spend more, right? And then at a certain point, you might have to fundamentally change the offer or just bring out different parts of the offer. Like, so for instance, with us, I gave those two funnel examples. In our offer, we can help with a lot of things. Okay. Sales recruiting is what we're really known for, but we also really help with like marketing support and building lead generation funnels because it just really goes hand in hand and most clients need it. So I can have one, it's the same offer, but I can have one funnel that emphasizes the marketing aspect and one that emphasizes the sales recruiting aspect. So the more you can create variation there, the more spend you can handle. And look, like even with one company in the info space or what have you, or in the services space, high ticket space, you can spend a lot. Like most people never really reach and then you can go multi-channel. You could also not only there's Google, YouTube,
TikTok, Instagram,
Facebook. You could do outbound. You can do strategic partnerships and sponsorships and JVs. You can do, referral strategies. You can do all sorts of stuff, right?
So there's completely just unique.
There's so many. There's organic. There's so many different ways to be able to scale still, right? And so, but most people don't even take ads to their natural extreme, in my opinion, and we're not even doing it.
So, what is Cole Gordon's best life advice?
Well, in terms of making money, what I would say is number one, find an industry that you're really passionate about. Number two, create a specialized skill set in that industry and do that by going to work for somebody in that industry that has a lot of momentum. Like really what you're kind of looking for is somebody who, like, let's say it's an industry you're really passionate about. You don't want to work for like a pure startup. You could. You don't want to work for a huge incumbent. You want to work for this company that it just has you're early, but it does look like they're going to have a lot of success. They're already starting to have success. So like for me, I got into kind of the info and coaching industry, traffic and funnels. I kind of caught them right at the time where they went from like 300 to 500 grand a month to like $1.5 million a month. And at that time, that was like the biggest in our industry. You kind of want to replicate that, right? So it's like industry that you're passionate about, find a company to go work for in that industry that has a lot of momentum and is kind of like, that excites you. I mean, should be a company you're like excited to work for, right? And then build a specialized skill set in that company, right? To where you can provide value and ultimately either, in some way, shape or form, drive revenue or just solve a big problem. I mean, it doesn't have to be marketing and sales and copywriting and media buying and all these things. Like, it could be some special type of development. It could be operations. I mean, whatever. It could be managing teams, but build a specialized skill set in that company. And then eventually, once you have that specialized skill, whether you just now are going to work for different companies and extend your career and just do different things working full time, or if you want to start your business, the most important prerequisite of all of that is the specialized knowledge, right? And what I just laid out, I mean, that's exactly what I did. But at the same time, if you read Robert Greene's book, Mastery, that's the archetype he really lays out. Naval Ravikant, that's the archetype he really lays out. So I really like that. And I think it's a much more predictable thing than just trying to get out of college and just like start something on your own.
Mm-hmm. So guys, with that being said, we're here with Cole Gordon and closers.io. You can look up Cole Gordon. I think your Instagram's Cole Thomas Gordon or just, Cole Thomas Gordon on Instagram, YouTube, closers.io. I mean, just type that in. And guys, so that was Kicking Ass, Taking Names with Cole Gordon. Thank you.
All right, man. Thank you.